Welcome back, whisky fans. Today I'm going to be looking at the third and final bottle that I've bought in 2023 before I go back to the 0 bottle intake. So I bought this one because I'm about to start uploading my new distillery series, and this is a whisky from a distillery that you almost never see, despite being founded by Pernod Ricard, Chivas Regal, in 2014 on the site of the old Imperial distillery. So if you didn't know any better, looking at that label, you might think that this is a Diageo Special Releases product. The label certainly has that feel about it, doesn't it? But it's not a Diageo product, it is a Pernod Ricard product. So, Dalmunach. Why is it after 9 years we never see Dalmunach bottled? This is kind of bottled by the Whisky Exchange, but they're kind of calling this the first official bottling of Dalmunach, even though it's kind of not, because it's for Whisky Exchange. But why do we never see official bottlings of Dalmunach? And even in the independent bottling market, we almost never see it. There's been a Duncan Taylor bottling and I think a North Star bottling, but that's about it. So despite being nearly old enough to release a 10-year-old whisky, very few people have actually tried any of this. That is, unless you buy Pernod Ricard blended whiskies, such as Ballantine's, in which case you might have already had this without knowing, because Dalmunach was designed, founded and created to supply single malt whisky to Chivas Regal blends. So it's kind of like the Pernod Ricard equivalent of the Singleton distilleries producing whiskies for like the Johnny Walker blends and things like that, or the Flora and Fauna range, or something like Strathisla, Kalila perhaps. You have to bear in mind that even Kalila, until relatively recently, wasn't really available as such as a single malt. So, like those distilleries, obviously with the exception of Kalila because that's peated, but like the Singletons and a lot of the Flora and Faunas, with this Dalmunach, you would probably not be far off the mark assuming that this is going to be a reasonably light, inoffensive flavour profile that's designed to play well with other blend components and not really stand out too much. At least that's what you would think. So the specs on this one, it is a semi-official bottling of Dalmunach, but it is, from the label it says exclusively bottled for the Whisky Exchange, and this label, it's a series of 3 whiskies that the Whisky Exchange are doing. I don't know off the top of my head if they're all going to be Dalmunach or if the other 2 are going to be from elsewhere, but it's the Scottish Mythical Creatures series. And that handsome chap on the label there is a Wolver. What is a Wolver, I hear you ask? If you're Scottish, you might know, because it's kind of a Scottish folklore thing that they're trying to educate us with, which is nice. I don't disagree with that. It's a nice little touch, having a little bit of local mythology, folklore involved in your packaging, your marketing. But a Wolver is essentially a werewolf that can't turn into a person, which is kind of like a wolf, but not. You know what I mean. So yeah, there will be 2 other whiskies in the series, but this one here, bearing in mind that Dalmunach is only 9 years old, this is a 6-year-old whisky and it has an age statement on the label. It comes in at a very, very nice ABV of 60% ABV. So an amazing presentation all round. But wait. You know what I'm going to say. I've looked over this label again and again. It doesn't come in a box, so the label is all we've got. And I've had a look on the Whisky Exchange website, and I don't think it says anywhere that this is natural colour and non-chill filtered. It says small batch, whatever that means. But it doesn't seem like they've guaranteed that this is natural colour or non-chill filtered anywhere. And I know what you're saying. I can hear you firing up the keyboards already. You're going to say, it's a high strength whiskey, it's 60%, it wouldn't be chill filtered. But there are chill filtered, high strength, even cask strength whiskies out there, and there are coloured cask strength whiskies out there as well. It's not a guarantee that it is all above board and a full craft presentation. And I'm sure that if you spent the time to contact Whisky Exchange, send them an email or a phone call, they'd probably tell you that it is full craft presentation. But this is kind of taking the piss now. There's so many people out there making seemingly good whiskey and they don't give us that guarantee of quality. How many years has the whiskey community been talking about natural colour and non-chill filtration. By the time I'm having to spend my time and effort sending an email to find out the details that should be on the label, it's already pissed me off. There is no excuse for not putting it on the label in 2023, and I don't understand why this is the third review in a row now where I have a whiskey that I suspect is a full craft presentation, but they haven't put it on the label. At least it's high strength, and to be fair, ABV and age statement are probably two of the four requirements that I would choose if I could only have two. Ironically, especially if you've seen Ralphie's recent video on QR codes, there is a QR code on the back of this bottle. It's right there. I'll hold that up so you can scan it if you want to have a look. But honestly, I wouldn't waste your time, because if you use that QR code, it takes you to an absolutely awful and intensely uninspiring, low-effort Pernod Ricard website that basically just tells you not to drink too much. So 10 out of 10 for embracing technology with QR code there, especially after Ralphie's recent video talking about the potential of QR codes, giving distilleries the potential to give information and transparency to the customer, but this time with this Dalmunach, it's a massive missed opportunity. It's not to say that all QR codes are a waste of time, because I get what Ralphie is saying, and if you look at like the QR codes that you get on things like Ardnamurchan, there is a wealth of information that you get from scanning that code. Really top level transparency and information that you don't see really from anyone else. So yeah, QR codes, good idea, but not like this. One last thing before we get some in the glass with this one. I briefly mentioned that it does say small batch on this, and obviously you're educated whiskey folk, you know your stuff. You know that small batch in Scotch whiskey doesn't have a legal definition, and you can make the largest batch of whiskey the world has ever known and call it small batch, and there's not really anything that anyone can do to stop you. But this stuff, bearing in mind that it's quite a rare whiskey and people like their new distillery releases, myself included, but this stuff has been available for quite a while, and at least as I'm recording this at the end of April, this stuff is still available. So I would say that that small batch is probably not that small, which is not a terrible thing, because it means it's still available for you and me and anyone that wants to try it. Doesn't matter how good a whiskey is, Springbank, if you can't buy it. It's also worth pointing out that Dalmunach calling this small batch, it may actually be a small batch for them, because the stills at Dalmunach are actually 30,000 litre capacity, so each still is around 3 times the size of the stills at Lagavulin, which are not small stills either. Should probably also mention that those 30,000 litre stills at Dalmunach, they've got 8 of them, so it really is a massive whiskey factory on an industrial scale. But it wouldn't be the first time that we've had absolutely cracking whiskey from a large distillery. So, Dalmunach 6-year-old, official bottling by the Whisky Exchange, on the nose. Bright and grassy, a little bit of sweet caramel on the nose, but it really is laser focused, very refined and sharp in style. Quite grassy, a little bit lemony, with a slightly fusty and very faint farmy quality on the nose. Gristy, biscuity, rich tea and shortbread. A little bit of vanilla on the nose, like a vanilla flavouring, as well as a little bit of a mealy flower type note. So not flower as in floral, flower as in self-raising, but also a really nice orange blossom note on the nose too. So I am nosing this at full strength. I think it's absolutely palatable at full strength. It does swim fairly well, but it's basically up to you how you want to drink it. So far though, it kind of fits the blend fodder profile reasonably well. It's not too offensive, it's chiseled, and it shows good malt character without being too extreme in any way. I can see this being quite similar to like something that you would get from Glenord or one of the Singleton distilleries. It has that kind of profile. Although obviously it's 60%, this is an entire world apart from like the Singleton 12-year-old at 40%. Let's see how it tastes. Lovely palate coating, sharp citrus fruitiness. Really develops and changes towards the late palate though, which I'll get to in a minute. On the early palate, I'm going to say creamy custard. So some kind of fermentary notes there, as well as some kind of mashed tun flavours. Quite a biscuity note coming through as well, so creamy custard and custard creams. You see what I did there? On the theme of those sort of gristy, cereal-y notes, there's a bit of a note of muesli as well as sweetened orange juice. So you could say that this is a little bit of a breakfast dram. But that second half of the palate really changes entirely. Towards the end of the palate, when you're drinking this at full strength, you get a real leafy and vegetal quality, quite a hoppiness, a little bit of a note of something like a Weiss beer or a wheat beer. So lightly hoppy, creamy and slightly sour beer notes. And I think it's a little bit unusual, but I really like it. I think that it really adds character, interest to a whiskey which is otherwise a little bit straightforward. As for the finish, medium long, and it really continues, at least at full strength, on those late palate notes. Very herbal, vegetal, notes of cut grass, aldehyde, and lightly hoppy. So, as I said before, I'm nosing and tasting this one at full strength, and I think that that's absolutely fine, but here's one I produced earlier. This says I've watered this down to 46%, so even though I've added a lot of water to this, I think it's about a 25ml measure with 7 to 8 millilitres of water added in. It's had a lot of water, but it's still very clear. Let's do a little bit of a comparison if we can. Looks actually slightly clearer, if anything, a little bit more clarity on the one that's been watered down. But you would probably expect that because it's quite warm in this room now. It's about 20 degrees in here. So at 46%, you're not likely to see a huge amount of haze until the temperature drops a little bit lower or until you add a little bit more water in. But I think it's worth adding water to something like this, especially at a young age and a high strength. Even if it's drinkable at full strength, it's worth having a play with water to see how it changes. So I do think that the bright citrus notes and the floral orange blossom quality to this have really exploded, really opened up and really come out to play, and they've kind of taken over from that biscuitiness. And watered down to 46%, this reminds me a lot of the flora and fauna releases. Light and playful, easygoing. The kind of thing that you can tell is made to go into a blend, but it's also decent quality. So very playful, light, sweet, floral on the nose. Let's see how it tastes at 46%. It's really interesting that on the palate, when you water this down to 46%, it opens up on the nose on those bright and fruity floral notes, but on the palate, it really kills that dry, grassy, vegetal note. It's still there, but it's really been relegated to a background note. I think it's taken a predictable hit in the intensity by watering it down to 46%, and it's probably made it a little bit more of a crowd pleaser. Now that I've watered this down to a lower strength, you can see how this would work really, really well in a lot of blended whiskey. And I also think if you try this, and it's a good lesson, trying this at full strength, it's got a lot of character, especially with those grassy qualities on the late palate, and a lot of people might not like that, but it just goes to show that you can add a little bit of water and it becomes something a lot more palatable and easygoing. I think that it's wonderful either way, really enjoyable at both strengths, although I probably would drink most of this at full strength to get that real intensity and that character on the late palate. Just going back to the full strength version now. I think more caramel on the nose as well at full strength. much more expressive when you water this down a bit. I think that at full strength the flavours are bolder but simpler. Just goes to show that even though something might be really good to drink at full strength, that doesn't mean that it's a waste of time having a play with water. On the late palate at full strength though, that curious, vegetal, slightly skunky, hoppy, cut grass note, it's really something that I think is not that commonly seen these days. I think that it used to be something that was much more common years ago, but not so much these days, as I think whiskey tends to be a little bit safer, often a bit more mass-produced and a bit more standardised in quality. But me personally, and probably a lot of people who have been around whiskey for a long time and they've experienced a lot of what whiskey has to offer, something like that can really offer some interest and improve the experience overall. I do think that that extreme grassiness, cut grass note is a little bit of an odd thing to put into a blend. It's definitely not a note which is shy and compliant, but then it does go away quite effectively when you add water. I think that apart from that vegetal note on the late palate, this really reminds me of something like a Bruichladdich Isla Barley. It also reminds me of Glenwivis, because I think that Glenwivis had a really unusual, grassy, hay, silage type of note to it as well. And I think that anyone that enjoyed the Glenwivis 2018, they'd probably really like this too. Me personally, I like this. This is a style of whiskey that I really enjoy. It's sharp and focused, lots of citrus, really bright, quite aggressive. It's just a style of whiskey that I find easy drinking in a way. It's just a style of whiskey that I really like. And importantly, I think that it has a lot more going for it than I expected from a 6-year-old blend filler. And I think it's very adequately mature for a 6-year-old whiskey. Let me know what you thought of this one if you've had the benefit of trying it. Are you tempted to try a whiskey from kind of a self-confessed blend filler factory, or does that sort of thing really not appeal to you? I think that a lot of people would probably underestimate this, and a lot of people will probably not try this thinking they know what it's going to be. But that's kind of a shame. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.